Right. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning. My name is Allycia, and I'm part of the co-design committee for the first ever Youth Summit in Australia. Today, I'm going to be interviewing one of my favourite people in the whole wide world, Mr. Marc Brew. Now, I met Marc Brew in Sydney for the Catalyst residency, and he was an amazing, inspiring young man that I got to work with at Catalyst. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Marc Brew.
Hello, Allycia.
Hello, Marc.
Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. It's a real honor. My name is Marc Brew, and I'm an artistic director and choreographer at Access Dance Company, which is based in Oakland, California. I'm also an independent artist and make my own work with Marc Brew Company. And I'm calling in today from Glasgow in Scotland, and I look forward to having our chat together today. So thank you.
Yes, I'm very excited about that. So I guess my first question to you, Marc, is who was your influences that inspired you?
Great question, Allycia. I began dancing very young, especially as a boy. I was probably about 6, 7. I grew up in a very small rural town in Jerilderie, in South Wales. And I was the only boy in the village who did dance. And my mother just saw that I had a lot of energy, so she decided to put that energy into me doing dance class, which is when I started. And I think when I started doing dance, I just loved being able to express myself through movement, and I felt confident and comfortable with moving and moving being my language rather than speaking. And I think the reason I was inspired to dance was when I was growing up, I used to watch a lot of older movies, like musical dance movies, like Gene Kelly in them and Fred Astaire. And I was like, oh, I want to do that. And I think, just being told, oh, yes, you can do that, and having teachers, a dance teacher who used to come to our town hall every Friday who sort of helped to guide me in that direction. And also I was very fortunate to have a school academic teacher who also taught me gymnastics and also the arts, and they really encouraged me. So I think having people in your life, and it could be your family, it could be friends, it could be your teachers, who just help to guide you and mentor you, was really valuable in my early career and beginning. But it got to a point when I was at age 11 and it was time to go into high school, and it was like, well, what next? Do I go to the local high school, or do we look for other options? And that's when my mother and my teachers explored options of me going to an art school. So I auditioned for a school in Sydney and an art school in Melbourne, and ended up getting a scholarship to both those schools, and decided to go to Melbourne because it was a bit closer to home. So that's when I began my formal training at age 11 to do dance half a day and academic the other half. And I always remember it was like, oh, I'm going to Fame school. Growing up, I used to watch Fame on TV, and I'm sure people know Fame, the musical, as well. And that was really sort of like that, growing up with dancers and musicians and training and dancing and getting your academic as well. So I really value those experiences in growing up.
Yeah, so I guess what the next question is what was your favorite career moments?
I think, definitely being on stage, performing, that's when I feel more comfortable and more confident, and I love connecting with audience. I also want to be really clear, because through Zoom you can't always tell, but I acquired my disability now 24 years ago at the age of 19. So I had a very formal training of dance training as a non-disabled person. And then at age 19, I was in a car crash that left me paralyzed from the chest down with a spinal cord injury. So I had to retrain and relearn how to move and how to dance. And actually I had to reassess what dance meant to me. As a formal training that I got, I was very much shown or wasn't shown other disabled people dancing. So I had to reassess, as I said, and dance what it meant to me. And that's when I realized dance was about expressing myself through movement, and I could still do that through my body. Whether I was sitting down, whether I was on the floor, whether I was being partnered with other people, I still wanted to have that self-expression through movement. So I think my highlights have definitely been, connecting with audience, growing and learning, and having the confidence to grow as a disabled artist, and that my disability now informs my work. It's a part of my identity. It's who I am, and when I choreograph and work with other dancers, whether it's working in a physically integrated dance setting or an inclusive dance setting, or it's for a classical ballet company, I always come in with the same practices and tools to really get the best from people. And I think that's led me to now, have those powerful moments of connecting through my teaching and connecting through choreography. And I really love that interaction, especially with working with, the next generation, younger generation of disabled artists and disabled people who want a career. Because when I acquired my disability, there was no role models out there. There was no one I could see who was doing this, who was dancing as a disabled person. So I had to travel and leave Australia, and I moved to New York and then to London. And now, as I mentioned, I'm in Glasgow. So I've had to continue and pursue my career internationally, but I would really love to empower, the disability community in Australia to be able to have those opportunities, and for those pathways to be available to everybody, to be able to have access to dance and to express themselves through their bodies.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I remember like when I first went to Sydney doing that workshop with you, I started thinking this is going to be really fun. And then I thought to myself, I love traveling and I want to perform and dance. So what kind of advice would you give to me if I want to travel and perform?
I would, I think it's about building one's network, building connections. So if there are places that you're interested in, or organizations or companies or other choreographers or other artists that you're interested in working with, to just reach out. And I've done a lot of that, through my career, is trying to, find that introduction, find a way to get to know people that you want to work with, start to build that relationship, and then seek for those opportunities. Often there are a lot of networking opportunities online through different e-groups and newsletters where you can find out opportunities internationally. And now, thankfully, there's a lot more opportunities for disabled artists to be able to partake in some of those opportunities. And then, a lot of it also is then about applying for funding. So you can apply for professional development funding to be able to go do a summer intensive, or you may want to do a choreographic residency. And I think that helps to build, your circle and your knowledge and your experiences. And I love traveling, and I know traveling's not for everyone, and it is a journey, and it is something that you learn about, especially, traveling with your disability, and just being aware about what your needs are and just being able to communicate those as you do travel. And I mean, the first time I traveled after my accident, I did travel with a friend who assisted me. And that was really comforting to know that I had someone to support me. But now, as I said, it's been 24 years living with my disability, that I travel independently on everywhere I go now. So, and that comes with confidence, and it's wonderful. You get to meet lots of people as you move around the world, and different engagements that you have. But just being aware as well, I think coming from Australia, a lot of other countries are not as developed as Australia. So what you'll need to do is research around what accessibility is like in other places you go, especially if you're traveling as a wheelchair user or other mobility aids that you have. As you all probably know, like what is accessible in Australia or where you live could mean something different in another country. So I think just doing your research and making those connections is really helpful to know before you arrive.
Yeah, that's really good. Another one I want to ask is, what are the barriers of people like doing like creative work?
Hmm. You know, I feel like my own personal mission is trying to remove barriers and making people aware of barriers. And I think, you know, there are still some basic barriers of even just physical access, you know, attitudinal barriers, people's attitudes can be barriers. Um, and, you know, when it comes to, as an artist with disability making work, sometimes the barrier can be about applying for funding and having the support that you need to be able to apply for funding to be able to make the work you want to make. Um, but I just encourage everyone to be your own advocate as well, and really speak up and let people know what your needs are, and to know that your needs are valid and important. Um, and I think, you know, what I love about, you know, work by disabled artists is they bring, you know, a different perspective to the art world and the creative world. And I think that's really important and needed. And, you know, we live in a very diverse world, so that diversity needs to be reflected in our art and also in our society.
Yeah, that's really good. I guess another thing I like to say is, like when oh, sorry. When you like, what's your favorite place to go to? Like,
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. My favorite place to go to, of course, is home, being in Australia. And I definitely wish I had more opportunity to be at home, and be there. I have, as I said, like I definitely have developed my career internationally, and that's what's sort of has kept me. You know, I work around the UK and Europe, and now I've been artistic director with Access Dance Company for the last 4 years. So I've been living and working in Oakland, California. So I really enjoyed that. But I think coming home, you know, there's nothing like that. But I also do love being a country boy as well. I love being in nature. So even just yesterday, I went to a beautiful loch, which is a lake here in Scotland, and just to be out in nature, to be with a friend, and to just be present, is really, you know, refilling one's soul and energy, which I really love. So I think it's good, you know, always try to find that balance in one life. And I'm not always very good at it because I'm passionate about what I do. So often I find I'm working all the time, but then also to having that time and space, to be creative, or to give space for creativity to happen, is important too.
it is definitely. So what sort of supports would we consider as we develop our own creative pathways?
Hmm. I think different support is dependent on the individual and what their needs are. Um, you know, I can tell, you know, for me, for example, when I am traveling, sometimes, and when I am making work, I will, if possible, have an assistant with me. And sometimes that assistant may be just around helping me with accessibility. Because as I mentioned, some countries you go to, it's like there's no curb cuts, there's no footpaths, there's no, you know, there are things, there's stairs everywhere. And as a wheelchair user, I'm needing some assistance with getting around, or, you know, someone representing me when needed. Um, and then in the studio, you know, when I'm working, I may need to work with someone who helps assist me um, with, you know, computer and technology, and recording video footage when I'm working. So it just depends on what people's needs are individually, and that's also why I mentioned, you know, earlier on, is just being able to communicate what your needs are, what your support needs are, and it's different for everybody, and that they're valid and important, and don't feel like you need to do that without that. But I think just being clear with your communication, and I would, you know, if I've been booked in to do a work, then I would always share them, you know, what my accessibility needs are. I have like a one-page document that goes, here are my, you know, support needs, here are my accessibility requirements, and then they're aware of it, rather than arriving and then it's a shock to people, like, oh, we didn't realize that you needed this. But But even things as, simple as like making sure when I'm traveling that I have an accessible accommodation that has, an accessible bathroom and restroom and, all of those things, which, as a person with disability, we live with every day. But just making sure that we communicate that as we venture in our work.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Do you have any advice for people with disabilities who want to create their own work?
Yes, do it. Go out there and do it. Yeah, look for those opportunities. Excuse me. Make those opportunities happen and follow your dreams. I was just talking today to a friend and was aware of like when at this point I'm like in my career, it's like where do I want to go? What are my goals? And then looking at how do I put a plan in place to achieve those goals. Network, meet people, work with other fellow artists. I have a great pool of friends who work in the creative industry, and I love being able to share ideas and experiences and problems and finding solutions. Yeah. And just remember that, in difference there is beauty, and we have a unique perspective and voice to bring to the world, and it should be experienced in whichever way you want to share your art. So follow your dreams.
And another question I like to ask is, what are your goals for, the future?
Yeah, well, considering what we're going through at the moment with COVID-19, I think a lot of it has just been in survival mode, which I think for a lot of us. But then looking at, I think, us going back to, how the way things were is not going to be what it is. So I think we're looking at how can we reimagine the future? How can we reimagine a way of working that is more equitable and inclusive for all? So taking what we're learning during this time and looking at how we can move forward and navigate through this change, and just trying to, as much as possible, which is, I know it's a bit of a roller coaster for all of us, but just trying to see the light at the end of the tunnel and to see, what positive things we can grow and take from this. And one thing I love about, the arts is we're so adaptable, and I think whenever there is crisis, it's the arts that sort of keeps going and finding ways to continue and to offer and provide. And I think now more than any, we need to also support the arts and the culture industries through this time.
Yeah, and I found when I was working with you in Sydney, I felt like he knows that I'm, an artist, and like when I work with you, I know what you're going through and all that, and it's just really amazing to be able to talk to you, even though we're not in Glasgow, meeting again. And so yeah, it's really amazing to talk to you again, Mark.
Yeah, no, my pleasure, Allycia. And there is something really, nurturing and valuable about being amongst fellow peers, being amongst other disabled people and, learning from each other and sharing experiences. And as I mentioned, 24 years ago when I acquired my disability, I didn't have that role model. I was sort of like learning for myself. But now, I'm in a place I love working with younger people. I love that there's, more of a movement now from younger people to really raise their voices and their voices to be heard and to be really reaching and striving to fulfill your goals and your dreams. And that really excites me. And now in my role as an artist in my current form and age, I love seeing that. I love supporting, the next generation of artists. So I just want to encourage everyone to keep going. And, there are going to be those barriers, but how do you move around it? How do you find solutions? How do you go through it? And what do you need to support you to fulfill your career and aspirations and bring that support to help you to move forward?
Yeah, and it's really quite inspiring on like seeing a lot of people, from young and old just doing what they love, and it's just amazing.
Yeah, and now, because of COVID-19, there's a lot more online opportunities as well, which has been a wonderful thing for a lot of disabled people or people with health conditions who have not had access to dance or dance training or theatre workshops or, going to see a live performance. And now this is all starting to be streamed online. And I totally get that now it's sometimes a bit of an overload, but it's really encouraging to see how people from home can now access online classes and workshops and performances. So that's one of those things that I feel like we can learn and take forward as we navigate this new future.
Yeah. So I think that would be a wrap up, I think. I hope so, because I don't have any other questions. So would you please join me in thanking Marc Brew from Glasgow. Marc, thank you so much for talking with me.
My pleasure, Allycia. Thank you so much. It's been a joy to be here in this space with you today, and all the best with your future and everyone. Thank you for having me. Mm.